I guess since you spent the early part of your career at Disney and up to and through The Lion King, doing a lot of work with them, what lessons did you learn from your time there and working on various pictures and various facets of the industry that you then try to carry through to this project and other projects, having seen how they do things, how they've done things for a long time, and how they've done things successfully?
Sure. Well, there was something that I learned from one of the 9 old men, which were the 9 animators that were the most important at Disney, and his name was Eric Larson, and I was a student of his when I first went to Disney, and he talked about a couple of things, but one was sincerity, and that was always very important when you talked about creating animated characters, that they really needed to have a heart and a soul, and in order to do that, you really needed to treat them with sincerity.
I mean, you've been trying to do Mr. Peabody and Sherman for a long time. For I think almost over a decade, you've been trying to bring this to the big screen. What was it about bringing these 2 characters to the big screen that you saw this thing all the way through to the end? It wasn't something that kind of got shelved, or you were like, it's too hard.
Well, you never know when you start on a project how long it's going to take. Mm-hmm. So it was 12 years ago, and we began on this incredible adventure. But it was really because of the characters. It was really because of Mr. Peabody and Sherman. They were characters that I grew up with, and I loved them when I remember watching their TV show on the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. And so when the opportunity came around to make it a feature film, I jumped at the chance, and like I said, I didn't know how long it would take. But once you get your teeth into something, I suppose as an artist, you get convicted and passionate about it, and you want to see it brought to the screen, and so you're pretty much going to do whatever you have to do to get it there.
It was originally conceived as kind of this live-action CG hybrid. At what point did you realize that was maybe not the right direction to go, and what made you decide, let's go full animation, and that'll be, it'll kind of carry through what it originally was and modernize it?
I think the idea of doing it as a live-action film didn't make sense to me, because it would be weird to have a dog being the father of this boy, which is only something that sort of makes sense in animation, because you can sort of go with it, it's a crazy idea, but in animation somehow it seems a bit more plausible.
Yeah, if you have just kind of this actual human boy being kind of bossed around or kind of directed by a CG dog, it would be
weird. It would be strange. I mean, the point is, you'd wonder what everybody thinks about the dog and the fact that he can talk and he's so smart, and it would just be a lot stranger. But what I loved about the original is that no one explained Mr. Peabody. He just was who he was. He was this super intelligent dog who'd won Nobel prizes and Olympic gold medals. But it just that's who Mr. Peabody is.
I mean, does that allow you to then kind of be freed to just kind of start where it is, as opposed to what seems to be a trend towards over-explanation and having to tell really deep backstories to explain it? Does the animation then free you up to kind of say, well, it's a talking dog and he's intelligent and it is what it is?
Exactly. This is Mr. Peabody. He is who he is. He came fully formed.
You also had, I believe, Robert Downey Jr. attached at one point to voice the character, and then that didn't come to pass. Was there a particular reason for that kind of falling through?
Well, what happens is when you go after certain stars, they typically will not audition. And that was true of Robert Downey. So we actually wanted to bring him into the recording studio to work with him, and it was right at the time that he was doing The Avengers. And he was so busy, really was not available to us. And after waiting for a certain amount of time, we felt like we needed to move forward. And so we decided to open our search again. And that's how we found Ty Burrell, who was just, I think, in the first 1 or 2 seasons of Modern Family. So it wasn't quite the giant hit that it was today. And so Ty actually came in and did an audition, which was fantastic. And what's great is that at the time when we cast him, we were like, well, he may not be a big star, but he was the right actor for the role. And of course, in the last 3 years, he's become a giant star.
Was the character then different? How different was the character, being geared more towards, I guess, Robert Downey Jr. and the personality that he might bring to it, as opposed to kind of what the final version is?
To me, it was Mr. Peabody. Mr. Peabody is the character. It's a little bit like Sherlock Holmes, and we've seen Robert Downey play that part, but of course there are many, many other actors that have played Sherlock Holmes over the years, and for me it was the same thing with Mr. Peabody. I was supposed, many actors could play him, and they would play him slightly differently depending on who that actor is, but to me he's a classic character, so I think it's a role that can be inhabited by many actors.
Here you have kind of a pair of characters that younger audiences may not know. The characters are older, for people of a different generation. How do you then, I guess, break through kind of the noise of a lot of things being geared towards families right now? So how do you break through to these younger audiences and say, here are these characters that you may not know, but they're worth getting to know?
Absolutely. Well, I think, for me, one of the things that I noticed right away was that when I would tell the story to kids who didn't know anything about the original, the minute that they hear that the dog is the boy's father, their eyes light up and they are totally like into it. And I think that that made me feel like this was something that could really work for a modern audience.
How difficult is it to kind of strike that balance then between, obviously you're having kind of an all ages picture for kids and for their parents, or even just for adults who are familiar with it from back in the day. How difficult is it to strike that balance between having material that is geared towards the younger side and then also for adults who aren't necessarily looking for, kiddie fare?
Well, I think one of the hallmarks of the original was how smart the writing was. It was really funny, and it worked always on two levels. So if you were a kid, you could enjoy one thing, but if you were an adult, you would enjoy something else. And you might not understand the jokes when you're a kid, or not all of them, but that didn't take away any of the entertainment. And in fact, as you would see it again and again later in life, you would start to understand and sort of get some of the jokes. And I think that's what we went for in this film, so that it really does work on two levels. There's great material for the kids, and there's really funny, interesting, intelligent stuff for their parents.
Time travel can be kind of a very sticky situation. There's certain holes that you can fall in, different traps. Did you kind of establish rules for what could and couldn't be done, or kind of go back through other kind of, I guess, tropes that were already established? Or does the animation, like you said, you have a talking dog, does it kind of free you up to do different things and kind of play with the rules?
Well, actually, to solve some of those problems, we hired a physicist who actually told us all of the rules about time travel, and particularly how it applied to films. So there are different kinds of theories that apply to movies like Back to the Future, for example, or Terminator 2, and they're quite different. And he actually took us through to explain exactly what happened in either of them. And so we had to kind of come up with our own sort of hybrid, but mostly we lean towards one, not the other. One is called the block theory. Not that you are really interested in this. One is the block theory, and the other is the multiverse.
Oh, totally. Time travel to me is a fascinating thing, because people are always. It seems to come into a lot of projects and a lot of stories, and it's always a matter of how does it work, and people try to nitpick at what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely. I'm one of those people too. But do you remember the movie Looper? I don't know if you saw that. There's the great scene where Bruce Willis talks about pushing the straws around the table and saying how, what a waste of time it can be to actually try to explain the rules because they're so complicated. Well, we were trying to go for something maybe slightly more simple, but something that has been, well worn. These are not theories we made up per se. These are theories we were just applying to.
Well, I want to ask you one more question, going back to, I guess, The Lion King, because The Lion King is kind of this benchmark that all kind of animated films seem to go towards. Everybody always says, "Oh, this is the best movie I've seen since The Lion King." Is that pressure to, when you're making a new film, to kind of have to answer to that, and does it enter into your head like, how do I try and make something as good or better than this modern day classic?
Since it's literally been 20 years since the movie came out. Obviously, it's been amazing that it has stayed around as well as it has. I mean, you never really expect when you make a movie. You hope for the best. You hope it's going to be, well liked. And Lion King happens to be, something. I mean, it's gone beyond my expectations. Put it that way. So yes, absolutely. I mean, it's something that it informs, all of my creative endeavors and thoughts, and it's sort of with me all the time.
Did you know that it was going to be that, or at what point did you kind of say, we have something really special?
Sure. Well, what's interesting is that when we made the movie, it was actually considered the black sheep of the studio. It was considered like an experiment that may not work and, would only make, very little at the box office. But, it was something that we believed in. It was something that we wanted to be great. And, it was groundbreaking in many ways because it was so different. It wasn't a fairy tale based on something that everyone knew, like The Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast. It was about a totally original story. And so it was impossible to know. I think once we had put the Circle of Life together and presented that, we actually did a preview of the Circle of Life in front of other films in the theater, and the reaction we got was pretty spectacular.
All right. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.